podcast for those who suffer, which is everyone.
It's a space where we can speak honestly about what it feels like to be in desolate places without losing hope.
Welcome to In the Thicket.
Mary Webb joins us this week to share about her beautiful daughter, Gemma. Following complications during Gemma's birth, she was diagnosed at 4 months with severe spastic, quadriplegic cerebral palsy and epilepsy. Mary shares about the really difficult first years of Gemma's life, about the isolation that she felt, and about the grief that she had to process for what would and would not be part of Gemma's life. But she also shares about how the Lord sustained her through his providence and through supportive family, and about the joy that has come in life with little Saint Gemma. If you know a family who's walking this road of childhood disability or adverse prenatal diagnosis, please consider sharing this episode with them. And if you are a parent of a child with a disability or have received an adverse prenatal diagnosis, we hope this episode is a support for you. And please know that we are praying for you in a special way. God bless.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to In the Thicket. I'd like to say a special hello to all of those who are new, because I think we have a bunch of new listeners through various things on Instagram. We are now over the 900 mark for followers.
Whoa, that's awesome.
Which is, I mean, in Instagram standards, it's not like thousands of followers, but it's like one of those marks they say like it hovers around that for a while, and then it's like this mysterious.
Anyways. The mysteries of Instagram.
We love all 900 of you.
We do,
yeah.
yes. And we are really not that concerned with how many of you are, but just the fact that we want to say hi if you're new. I'm Erin, and
I'm Rachel.
Yes,
I'm Rachel.
I'm Nicole.
And we have a lovely guest with us today, and her name is
Mary. Hi.
This is Mary Webb. She's joined us today. So if you're watching on Instagram, you'll see 4 of us. And we did agree ahead of time that Mary has the best hair out of all of us. Yeah. So you can feel free to check that out. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So fun fact, we were talking a little bit about NET earlier, which is National Evangelization Teams. And both Nicole and Mary actually had discerned maybe going on NET and then didn't end up going on NET, but both of them have siblings who went on NET. And then Mary's sister, Katie. Hi, Katie, if you listened. This is Erin. I was in the same small group as Katie on the NET year. And then Mary's husband, Matt, was also on our NET year. And we're very old.
Just say that's honestly all to say is that we're very old.
Yeah. It's all to say like the small Catholic world. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
It's very small.
True.
Small. I feel like it is. Yeah. And Mary lives on the East Coast, which I love because I love the East Coast of Canada. Yes, we should say that, in New Brunswick. Do you want to tell us a little bit about where you live, Mary?
We are in St. John, New Brunswick. Matt is actually from Halifax, so we're both East Coasters. St. John, oh gosh, it's not huge. It's a fairly small city, and I was born in Toronto actually, and moved to St. John when I was 8. So it was going from the biggest city in Canada to this tiny little city on the coast. But oh gosh, I love living on the water, on the bay. It's got a really small town feel. Markets, everybody's really friendly. Everything they say about Maritimers being friendly is true. We're the nicest Canadians.
Totally.
Which is saying something. You know what I mean?
Right.
Saying something.
That's right. Because everybody thinks Canadians are very polite in general. And then,
Maritimers are extra nice.
Yeah, extra
That's
nice.
Actually true. Yeah.
If you were standing, so I lived in Yarmouth in high school, and then I went to Dalhousie in Halifax, Nova Scotia. So I'm like, I have a big heart for Nova Scotia. It's like, I swear, my favorite place in the world is the Yarmouth Lighthouse. It's the best place in the entire world. I love it. But it's true about everybody being friendly, because you could be like standing on a street corner with another person, and by the time the light changes, you'll be invited to their house for tea next Thursday.
Yeah. Everybody says hello, and everybody knows everybody. Everyone knows everybody else. Like you say, oh, I'm from this town. And oh, do you know so-and-so? Oh, yeah, I do.
And there's like 5 very prominent last names, like Smith, LeBlanc.
It's great.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Have you guys been? I can't remember if you guys have been, Rachel or Nicole.
I have. Yep. I've been to Fredericton, and like basically my family did a thing where we just drove through Quebec, and then we did New Brunswick and PEI. And I think we did, I can't remember whichever, but we didn't do all 4. We did 3. And then I've been to whichever one I didn't go to with my family. I think I went to with like band in high school. And so, yeah. And it's beautiful. It's so beautiful. And I feel like every province in the Maritimes has a different, like in some ways, a completely different feel to it than the others. Like, yeah, it has its own flavor, and it's really, but they're all, just beautiful. And the water, and it's just gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I recommend.
My dad is Acadian, so his family is originally from New Brunswick. So from
I can't believe I forgot that.
Yeah.
I totally knew that.
So like, but I've actually never been. I've never been to Rogersville or anywhere around there. But I did get to go to Newfoundland, St. John's, not St. John, St. John's. When I was 16 on like a choir tour, and I remember like being downtown. It was a rainy day. Shopping, in the little shops or whatever. And then friends and I like standing in the middle of like on the sidewalk, and we were like, oh, should we walk to that stoplight or to cross or this one? And we were trying to figure out. And as we were just standing there deliberating, all the cars stopped in the middle of downtown, and they were just like waving us across. And
oh my gosh.
And it like, every time I tell people that story, they're like, oh, it's like a nice exaggeration. I'm like, no, like this actually happened. This is an actual thing.
That's so sweet.
I know. It was beautiful.
Like,
and then I got to
imagine?
go to, it's so wild, right?
Yeah.
And then I was in Prince Edward Island in PEI, in a trip about, I guess, almost 10 years ago now. But it was lovely. It was beautiful.
Beautiful.
So secret of the Maritimes, cow chips.
Oh, I never had any cow chips.
So cow chips are, there's a particular ice cream place on Prince Edward Island. Cows ice cream. That's what it is. And so they have like chips, like just regular like Ripple salted chips, and they cover them with chocolate. And you eat them.
I haven't had them.
And then I've had cow's ice cream. I did have that.
Me too. I've had the ice cream. I didn't have the chips.
I didn't have the chips.
So cow chips. Now you guys are going to have to try them. Yeah, that's right. Special order them. We're going to do a giveaway next season. A case of cow chips.
Cow chips. Here you go. Great.
Yeah, that's right. So if you love chocolate,
can we get
chips,
them too? Then, though,
yes,
can we give them away to us?
Yeah, I think so. Exactly. I think we could. Yeah, I'm going to get you us for Christmas next year. That's what I'm going to get you. Good. So today we're really glad to have you, Mary, because I think this topic that we're going to talk about is something that touches a lot more lives than we really think of, whether it's people who have a child with a disability or who's medically fragile, or whether it's somebody who knows somebody, or whatever the case may be. And so it's going to be, I think, really beautiful for you to be able to share your story of your experience with Gemma and the rest of your family, and seeing your pictures of her on social media. Like, her smile is just like, it's like a ray of sunshine. She's so sweet. I've never even met her, but she's just, she's so sweet. So we're really excited to have you here today. So maybe we can get you to start off and just tell us a little bit about your family, how you met Matt, and
Sure.
Yeah.
I met Matt, oh gosh, years ago. I was 14 when I met Matt.
Whoa.
So he's from Halifax, and by that point I was living in St. John, New Brunswick, and there was this retreat that a youth team in St. John, it was called the Queen of Peace Youth Team. We'd put it on twice a year. It was called Raising Up an Army, and that was in Amherst, Nova Scotia, every May and every October. And so the youth team, we would do skits, we would have a music ministry, we would have a speaker, we'd have mass, men's group, women's group, and it was just a weekend-long retreat. And so I met Matt at this retreat when I was 14. I think it was the first Raising Up that I went to. And yeah, we were friends for years. I was never interested in Matt until he kept telling me, "You're going to marry me," when I was a teenager.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, for years he told me, I'm going to marry you. And I was like, "You're nuts."
That's awesome.
Oh God, he's a funny guy.
Yeah.
So after he did 2 net years. He did a net year in Newfoundland on a parish team, and then he did a parish team in Ireland. And after his Ireland year is when I sort of started feeling God being like,
oh, you might want to
yeah, you should
take a second
move this
look here.
way.
Yeah.
And I told him about it because my dad kept saying to me, well, there's one way to tell if something's from the Lord, you can test it. And well, how do you test it? Tell Matt you think you're supposed to marry him. And so I did.
Wow.
And
he was like, I know, I've been telling you that.
basically, yeah. No, that's exactly what happened. And he was like, great, finally. We started dating and we got married 3 years later. And so we've been married for just over 10 years now. We celebrated our 10th anniversary last July. And
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, 10 years. It's a big deal. Well, I mean, it felt like a big deal.
Yeah.
And we have 4 kids. So Gemma is our oldest. And then we have one son. His name is James. He is 8. And we have 2 more girls. We have Lucia. She is 6. And Amelia. She's 2.5. She's my pandemic baby. I had her in the middle of lockdown. So
oh my gosh.
That was wild.
Oh, I bet it was. Oh my goodness. That's crazy. Because were you just alone in the hospital when you had her? Was Matt able to be there?
He was allowed to be with me for the delivery, but not for any of my prenatal appointments. And that was a little difficult because I get a severe form of morning sickness when I'm pregnant called hyperemesis gravidarum. And it was really awful with Amelia. I was vomiting profusely. For the whole 9 months. And then I had a preterm labor scare at 18 weeks with Amelia, and Matt couldn't be with me at the hospital when I was like contracting.
Oh my gosh.
Your baby's coming at 18 weeks. So it was, higher stress than some of my past pregnancies, but we got to the end. Matt was there. We got home, and it's oh gosh, she's cute. She's cute. I said I would have 10 of her if I didn't have to do her pregnancy again.
That's right. Oh, that's funny. I know they're very cute kids. I can testify to that. You could probably follow Mary on I think your Instagram is open, I think, eh?
I think it is.
People can go see your cute kids.
Yeah, I think it is open because we had a GoFundMe last year for Gemma's van.
Right.
And so I opened my Instagram because we were sharing our GoFundMe, which was successful.
Yay.
Which is amazing.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah. This is good. Okay, well then this is great. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about Gemma, and I'm sure, in the midst of everything, you'll be able to share about the other kids too and how they love her and all the things that go with that. But what happened during how was your pregnancy with her and then the birth and after birth?
My pregnancy was normal, actually. It was, so my first baby, I was young, I was 23. And there were no issues besides, lots of morning sickness.
Right.
But no, it was a healthy, low risk pregnancy the whole time. And we didn't find out what we were having, whether or not she was going to be a boy or a girl. But early on in my pregnancy, I had sort of asked Saint Gemma Galgani to watch over my baby. I sort of fell in love with Saint Gemma. Sorry, I'm losing my earbud here. I sort of fell in love with Saint Gemma a couple years before Matt and I got married, and that sort of love for her continued on. And so I just asked her, watch over my baby. And when I was 8 months pregnant with Gemma, a friend of mine who knew how much I love Saint Gemma, she had another friend who had been in Rome who gave her these relics, first class relics of Saint Gemma Galgani, and she gave them to me for my 23rd birthday when I was 8 months pregnant with my Gemma.
Wow.
And I had been saying the whole time to Matt, like, if it's a girl, I really want to name this baby Gemma. He was like, oh, I don't know. I don't know if I love the name. I don't know anybody with the name. And then I got first class relics of Saint Gemma Galgani while I was pregnant with Gemma. And I looked at Matt and I said, it's a sign. This is like, her name is Gemma.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just normal, healthy pregnancy. And then we went to 40 weeks. We went right to the end. She still didn't come, and everybody said, first babies are often late. So I was scheduled to be induced about a week and a half after my due date because Gemma still hadn't arrived. She was very comfortable. The night before my induction, my water broke at home. So we went to the hospital, so excited. Okay, we're having this baby. And during labor, her heart rate would drop and then come back up, and then it would drop and come back up. And the nurses, you know, they would sort of reposition me, and Gemma seemed to be recovering well. So nobody really, they didn't act like there was any sort of emergency situation, because I don't think any of the nurses or doctors thought there was any sort of emergency situation.
Right.
So it was a 12-hour labor right at the end, literally right at the end. It was 12 noon on October 3rd, and my nurse checked me, and I was just about fully dilated, and then Gemma's heart rate just dropped, and it didn't come back up. And so my nurse tried for a few minutes to flip me around in all sorts of different positions, because that had worked throughout the labor, and this time it wasn't working, and her heart rate was just dropping off. And so all of a sudden, the nurse hit this button, and all these doctors flooded into the room. And I like 10 or 11 people in the room, and Matt had just been sleeping in the chair beside me, and I was trying to like reach him, wake up, like before all these people crowded between us. And he sort of sat up and looked around and looked kind of startled. And I just said, text my family, ask them to pray. And the doctor, he looked at me and he said, we need to get this baby out now. And so in my head, I thought, okay, we're going for a C-section, like my first baby, going for a C-section. But he said, nope, you're going to push and we're going to pull with a vacuum.
Wow.
And so that's what we did. So 24 minutes, well, after we started pushing, so at 12:34 she was born. So 20 minutes of pushing, 34 minutes without oxygen. Gemma was born, and she was born still. She wasn't breathing. She was completely blue and lifeless and covered head to toe in meconium. And the meconium is the first bowel movement that a baby typically has after they're born. But if they're in distress in the womb, they sometimes will have that first bowel movement in the womb, which can be dangerous because meconium aspiration, getting it all in the lungs. So that's exactly what happened with Gemma. And I remember, it's awful. It's my first memory. And I've said this to my mom. I feel so guilty that my first memory of Gemma is this. But when they were lifting her and rushing her away, she had all this meconium like pouring out of her mouth and her nose. And my first thought was, looks like a swamp monster.
Oh, man.
Like, that was my first memory of my baby. And so they rushed her over to this table, and they were cleaning her off, and Matt and I were just sort of sitting there. Nobody was saying a whole lot. And I'm trying to sit up, and I said, what did we have? Because they didn't tell us. They were just so focused on the baby who wasn't breathing. And one of the nurses said, it's a boy. Oh. And then they cleaned her off a little more. And then another nurse said, no, it's a girl. And then I looked at Matt and I said, it's Gemma. And then they rushed her from the room. So that was wild. That was really, like, just completely, we're not prepared. We were not prepared for that kind of situation at birth. And we didn't really know what was going on with her for the first few hours that she was in the NICU. I was able to go see her a few hours later, and just hooked up to machines, and they weren't even sure why her heart rate dropped the way it did, why it didn't come back up. Like her first hours of life, we didn't really know what was going on. And then it was around 3 or 4 in the morning, her first night. We weren't staying in the NICU. Our hospital here in St. John is not huge. And so our NICU doesn't have spaces for the parents to stay with babies. I think some bigger hospitals in bigger cities with higher level NICUs have places for the parents to stay. Right. But I was out on the maternity recovery floor, and it was 3 or 4 in the morning, and the neonatologist came into my room and woke us up. And he said to us, we just want to let you know that Gemma started having seizures. And he said the seizures, they're so severe that she stops breathing when she's having them, and we have to like resuscitate her every time. Wow. And he told us, he said, I think that you should call your family because we don't think she's going to survive. Wow. So I just like shock. We hadn't held her yet. I hadn't held my baby at that point yet. And now this doctor is telling me, you know, I don't know if your baby is going to survive. So we got up, we called our family, everybody came to the hospital to say goodbye. And we had our priest come, he baptized her in the NICU while she was on her way into an MRI. And then from there, it was just doctors coming in, and one neurologist came in and said, I think that we can help her recover, but her brain needs a serious break. It's going to be essentially an induced coma. And, you know, do you consent to this? And we said, do what you need to do.
Yeah.
And at that point, I brought St. Gemma's relics into the hospital, and I put them in her isolette with her. And we just asked people to start praying. And we had thousands of people from all over the world praying for her. And she started improving really fast. Those first few days in the hospital, because she was having these seizures, they were actually being brought on by any type of stimulation. So Matt and I were not allowed to reach in and touch her anymore. So couldn't hold her, couldn't touch her. And so the nurses, like, I hadn't changed her diaper. The nurses were doing changes very quickly. Any sort of blood draws, everything was done really fast.
Yeah.
And it was just, I think part of me was in shock, I think, but there was a real peace as well. And Matt and I we've talked about this a lot over the years about how peaceful we felt when Gemma was in the NICU. My mom and my sisters, all my family would come to visit. And the first day, I'm a very emotional person. I cry easily. My feelings are hurt easily. And so my mom was warning my sisters, guys, be really nice to Mary. Like, she's probably going to have a breakdown when you get in there to see her. And they were shocked at how sort of chipper and even keel that I was.
That's amazing.
Oh my gosh. It was supernatural peace, because I don't think I've ever experienced anything quite like it since. But yeah, she, so we couldn't touch her. We couldn't hold her. We felt really, really peaceful. I held it together pretty well when other people were around. And then in the evenings, my nurses would sort of make me sit in the bath for 20 minutes just to help with healing. And it was in the tub when I was alone that I would cry, and just for 20 minutes. And every night I would pray and I would ask Mary to please just go into the NICU and be the mother to Gemma that I couldn't be right now, because I knew she needed a mom and I wasn't even allowed to touch her. And that devastated me. But so I didn't know what else to pray. So I said, Mary, please just go and be her mom, go and be her mom until I can be her mom, basically. And 5 or 6 days later, on the day that I was being discharged, Gemma was obviously staying behind in the hospital longer. My family, my parents, my siblings, and some family friends, they all came to my hospital room, and we had kind of like a praise and worship prayer meeting. Kind of.
Beautiful. That's amazing.
And I hadn't told anybody about this prayer that I was praying every night to Mary. And as we were praying, one of my parents' closest friends, her and her husband, they're like family. We call them our sparents. They're our spare parents. And her name is Cheryl. And she said to me afterwards, she said, Mary, I have to tell you, when we were all praying, I saw Mary and Jesus going into the NICU every night that you and Matt would leave. Mary and Jesus would go in, and she would go stand at Gemma's isolette, and she would pet her and stroke her and hold her. And I just really felt like I needed to tell you that.
Oh my gosh.
And I was just like, oh my gosh.
And we should say too, like when we were praying before we started the thing, like when we were praying, I felt like Mary was with us even here, you know? So, which is like, yeah, she's all over anything to do with motherhood, you know, real motherhood.
When you said that, it's funny. I had thought about this story about Mary, and I wasn't sure if I was going to tell it. But when you said that when we were praying, you really felt Mary, I was like, okay, I'm going to tell them, because Mary is invested in Gemma's life.
Oh yeah, totally.
Right from the beginning.
Wow.
Yeah. So
beautiful.
Oh, it was amazing. And then Gemma just was sort of rapidly improving in the hospital, and then we got to hold her for the first time when she was 6 days old. I got to breastfeed her for the first time when she was 9 days old. And then at 16 days old, they were sending her home from the NICU. And then the neonatologist said to me, he's like, I can't explain why she's well enough to go home, but she is. And here you go. Good luck. Godspeed. Here is your profoundly disabled baby. Good luck. That's not what he said. But that was sort of what was about to come.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then, I mean, during that time, like, it's just so beautiful how you described the grace of that, of peace, like, and even, so I can just share, like, it that part of her being born and the, like, no movement, no breathing, all of those kind of things, it hits pretty close to home for me, because that my nephew too, when he was born, my youngest nephew, his APGAR was 1. Like, he wasn't breathing, he was blue, he was, and then they just take them, and it's so crazy. The teams, when they come in to take them away, are like snap, 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 like, it's so crazy. And you didn't have time. Like, did that, like, how did that kind of unfolding of, like, processing those things, how did that go over time? And when you guys got home, like, what was that kind of like?
Oh, the processing of things. I mean, I don't think I really started grieving for quite a few months after she was born. After we came home, things were calm for the first couple of weeks. And we she didn't have a diagnosis yet. We knew that she had seizures at birth, but we didn't really have anything yet at this point. But we knew, obviously, we're going to be watching for, long-term brain damage. She probably has a traumatic brain injury from her birth, but we didn't really know what that looked like yet. A couple weeks after we brought her home is when she started crying. And it was really, really intense crying. Her neurologist described it as like colic times 10. And there was just nothing that would stop the crying, 10 to 15 hours a day of just inconsolable crying. And that went on for the first 18 months of her life. And we didn't really understand it. That was probably, honestly, like the hardest thing to deal with. The first year of her life was just this constant crying. What it was is because of sort of the amount of brain damage she had and where it was in her brain, it caused this like neurological cry. So there was nothing actually making her cry. Like, she wasn't in pain, but it's like her brain couldn't shut off the response to cry. So there might have been something that triggered the crying, but then her brain didn't know how to shut it off because there was so much damage. So just crying all the time. All the time. And I remember her first year feeling what I think was probably fairly close to despair. Because I just had this child who did nothing but cry. Is she ever going to smile? Is she ever going to laugh? Is she going to be miserable her whole life? And then she wound up being diagnosed at 4 months old with severe spastic quadriplegic, cerebral palsy, and epilepsy. So those were the first diagnoses that we got. She was 4 months old. And I think that is when my grieving really started, because that's when, okay, we have a name, we've got a diagnosis. And in some ways, when you get a diagnosis, there's relief, because okay, you know what it is, you know what you can work on, you know what you can't change, what the things you have to accept, sort of. But there's also a real grief that comes with a diagnosis like that. Like, they were really painting this doom and gloom picture. She's never going to walk, she's never going to talk, she's never going to do this, never going to do that, she's always going to be in diapers, she's always going to be 100% dependent on you for everything, she's going to die young. We don't even know if she'll reach adulthood, basically. Like, these were all the things they were telling us about our 4-month-old, our first baby. And we were young. Like, I was 23, Matt was 25, and this is not how first time parenthood is supposed to go, right? Like, nobody. That was another thing I really struggled with, actually, was I didn't know anybody who had gone through what I did. And when I was in all these sort of moms groups and birthing groups, no one talked about the scary stories or the bad stories. And any mom who sort of slightly brought them up was like kicked out, shunned. No, that's too scary. You can't say that. You can't talk about stuff like that with pregnant women. But I I feel like that really did me a disservice. And I feel like it does women a disservice, because then when they go through something like that, they're not prepared. They're like, well, nobody told me that this could happen.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about it. This doesn't happen, but it does. Women just aren't allowed to talk about the scary mom things, the scary pregnancy things. So yeah, that was sort of, I was struggling with feeling alone, feeling like, why didn't anybody tell me? And then now grieving this diagnosis, grieving the mother that I thought I would be, grieving the daughter I thought I would have, the family life I thought we would have, and the life that she would never have. There was a lot of grieving. And that's when I started writing. I started keeping a blog about Gemma, because it was the only way. Just, I needed to write things to get it out. It was the only way I could sort of process what I was feeling. So that,
for people, just in case people are interested in reading, what's your blog called, or where could they find it?
I don't have it anymore.
Okay.
So I know. I wasn't sure if I should mention that. Oh gosh, I wasn't sure if I should mention the blog, but no, I shut it down a couple years ago. I don't know if that's not that it served its purpose, but I really felt like I had gone through quite a bit of healing. And so it was called Kisses from the Cross. And it was just about sort of grappling with my faith in the midst of this sort of life-altering suffering that I was not prepared for. And I really did find a lot of healing, though, and started finding a lot of joy in life with Gemma. And so I started writing less, and then it'd be like a year or two, and I hadn't written anything because I didn't feel like I needed that therapy source. It was for me. So no, I shut it down. Some people ask.
That makes sense. Like, it makes sense. And but I have a question, because I just also want to just, say, I can't imagine just those months with Gemma crying, because I have just a nephew, like he's almost 9 months now. And like when he cries, it's just so awful. And you just want to do anything to sort of, I mean, sometimes now he's like older, he complain cries, which is a different kind of cry. But when he was like really little and he was just crying out of pain or discomfort or whatever, and you just, as an adult who loves his baby, who can't communicate any other way, you're like, what do I do? And I'm not even his parent, so I can't imagine being a parent in that situation and just not knowing. I mean, maybe after you knew that this is why the crying was happening, maybe it might have been a bit more of a comfort, but I can't imagine just going through this time of just not being able to console your baby. That's just, I can't even imagine that. It's just,
it's like Matt and I will talk about it sometimes, and we'll look at each other like, how did we make it through that first like year and a half to 2 years? And Matt will say, I don't remember. Legitimately doesn't remember, because it was just like we were living in a fog of just real chronic sleep deprivation and grief. And this child who cried all the time. We kind of became hermits that first year. We couldn't go anywhere. Gemma would scream and cry in the car seat to the point that she'd be vomiting and aspirating and turning blue. We didn't go to restaurants. We would go to mass because it was an hour, and usually one of us was sort of moving her the whole time, because a lot of sort of sensory input would sometimes calm her down. So we burnt out quite a few hair dryers, because the really loud white noise would sometimes bring her down a bit. Or sometimes even if you would clap really loud, it would startle her out of it, essentially. I know the sort of tricks we learned to sort of to calm her a little bit, but we didn't do anything. We didn't go anywhere. It was incredibly isolating. Incredibly isolating. My mom had told me that my second oldest brother had colic. And she was like, and it's nothing compared to like the way that Gemma cried. So it was.
That's insane.
Like I said, it was probably as close to what I think despair was. Like, I think that's the closest I got in my life, was that first year, like the first 18 months of Gemma's life.
Yeah. And where did you because it's so hard. I feel like sometimes when we talk about the cross, because sometimes, like for me, for example, in times of suffering, I expected the Lord to be there in like a more present way almost. And then it was surprising when he was not, like right? Like in a way of like, I'm with you and you can feel him on your side, like patting you on the back. And, and I was like, I mean, it makes sense because it's the cross in a sense, like, and there's, and it's like suffering with the Lord, but I'm curious, like, how did you experience that? Or where did you find the Lord in those things? Or what was your experience of him in that time?
So I definitely found when he was present, it was like very obvious, like he was doing these sort of big things, like Gemma's recovery in the NICU was really big. And then our parish took up a collection force that Matt could stay home from work for a couple of months. And it was quite a few thousands of dollars. And it was enough for him to be home with me. And that was sort of a very obvious, like, I'm taking care of you.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, I had these big, obvious shows from God that, I've got this. But then on the other hand, too, it was still it was trying to remind myself of that when we were in the throes of Gemma's crying. It's hour 11 today, or Gemma's got this other illness, unexplained illness, and we're in the hospital again, because we were in the hospital a lot her first few years of life. And often there wasn't a reason, like the doctors couldn't figure out what was making her sick, but something was making her sick and she needed to be hospitalized. And it was really, I had to recall how he had been, like, sort of when we were on the mountain, because then when we were in the valley,
it was like, where are you?
Oh yeah.
And
oh yeah.
I mean, I wanted to know too, because you said you were writing this blog, and there's sort of a sense, I feel like I mean, I would be like, what the heck, God? Like, what's that, what's going on here? What's happening? And like, because you use the words like you were grappling with your faith as you were going through this. And I can imagine if that was, I would totally be in that boat, of like, what is who, how, and why, and
like it rips the foundations away
it's like,
somehow.
I thought you loved me and my family and my daughter, and why, and so I just want to know, like, what was your process in your relationship with the Lord through that, and through the writing, like as you were grappling, how did you come through that? Like, what did he tell you, or how did you sort of stay in that relationship with God and believe in his love for you? Like, maybe the big things were part of that, but I'm sure that in those moments, the big things they weren't enough. But the whole story, sort of, God speaks in the whole story. So now you're sort of in a new place, but looking back, like how would you say that you how's your relationship with the Lord kind of going, at that time?
Oh man. I know I'm trying to figure
out.
We're
just asking the easy questions tonight,
right?
That's right.
I had never really encountered suffering quite like Gemma's before. And Catholics, at least I did before Gemma, I'm ready to suffer for you, Lord, and I'm ready to be a saint. And then, he was like, okay.
And then the cross comes and you're like, wait a second, this is not what I had imagined.
Oh gosh. I mean, I never sort of lost my faith, but I really did experience so much sorrow. And, why God, why my baby, why me? Like, is this a punishment? And that was one thing I had a hard time sort of coming to terms with, was it's not a punishment. It just is, I had some pretty good spiritual direction though, through my parents and these parents who I mentioned earlier. And my dad, he would often say to me, she's a saint, and her reward will be so great in heaven. And he said, you can't, or what my dad was saying to me, he said, I can't describe to you the joy that you are going to feel when you see the work that she did once you're in heaven. And I really I clung to that because I didn't find anything else consoled me. I spoke to quite a few other parents who had kids with really severe disabilities, and because at that point I was still really struggling to find joy with Gemma and joy in this life. And there was a lot of bitterness from these parents, and I didn't want to go the way of bitterness, and I saw how easy it was to go that way. Saw how easy it is to compare when other parents are complaining about their perfectly healthy kids, and I'm watching my kid with another serious illness in the hospital. It was so easy to get angry. And I found the only thing that really consoled me was thinking about her reward in heaven. And it wasn't an emotional consolation. I almost don't know how to describe what it was to me and what it still is to me, because there's often that my emotions can't really be consoled. Like if Gemma's really struggling with something, she's having a really hard pain day, if she's been having a lot of seizures, it's not my emotions, it's something way beyond my emotions. It's something like, it's like my soul knows the truth, and that her reward in heaven is going to blow my mind. And something about knowing that and really believing it is enough to sort of get me through. And that was really what I clung to in those early years, when there was a lot of grief and a lot of anger and a lot of bitterness and a lot of despair, was just thinking about heaven. And I had no choice. I had no choice but to think about heaven, because if I thought about my life on earth right now, I would just fall apart. I would just, I would lose it. I would cry. I would be anxious, melancholic, everything.
Oh yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. Like that is, I got shiver because I mean, that's so beautiful and so true. Like, cause it's a true, I think like, I can only imagine when you're in a moment like that, nothing short of the truth is enough. Like not even close to it. Nothing short of the truth even penetrates any kind of experience that's like that. So so beautiful that your dad had those, like the words of truth to sort of offer in that moment. Praise God. That's like
it reminds me of Our Lady's words. I think is it Lourdes or Fatima? I forget. I think it's Lourdes, where she says, "I cannot promise you happiness in this life, but in the next." And that's
it feels like both of them. I mean, you're right. She says that one of them, but definitely applies to both Fatima and Lourdes.
Well, and it's true, because all the things that would prevent us from being able to offer up our sufferings or to like offer ourselves up totally and completely in this life are things that are related to sin, right? Like to sin and woundedness, like inner woundedness. And Gemma doesn't, she doesn't sin. Like her union with the Lord, like there's nothing that separates them, really. So it's like, so she is, so the graces from everything that she's living right now are not limited by her own choice or by sin or anything like that, which is the truth, right? Like it is the truth, as difficult as it is. And I feel like it's the hardest thing to swallow, right? Like what's the hardest thing to swallow in the world is a child who's suffering. Like that's the hardest thing to swallow in the world, and it's still a mystery, but sorry, go ahead, Nicole.
No, sorry. So I have not seen a picture of Gemma. I'm like many of our listeners, I'm hearing this story for the first time. And so the question that I have right now is, how is it now? What is life like now?
It's funny, Erin, when you had initially asked me to come on and speak about suffering, I had said to my dad, I was like, I don't know if I can really speak to it anymore, because there's so much joy now. Gemma, so I definitely, I did go through all the stages of grief, and for a while, I got to a place where, I accepted the diagnosis. I accepted them, but it's beyond that now. It's not just, I accept it despite what it is because I love her. It's no, I love her and I accept her because of all of this. She wouldn't be who she is today if she was any different. If I had to go back, I would choose her exactly as she is. And there's real joy in knowing that, and in experiencing that, because I mean, when you look at it, it's not easy to be somebody's caregiver 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the rest of their life. Like, I think about it, sometimes it's a little bit daunting. She's almost 10 and she's starting to get too heavy for me. And, but oh my gosh, she's such a joy. She's such a joy. Like, I delight in this child. I can't even tell you how humbled I feel too. Like, knowing how close she is to God, knowing like I'm caring for a living saint. Like, oh my God, that you've given this soul to my care. Like, I'm just like, you're my ticket to heaven, Gemma. I say that to her sometimes. But yeah, she's great.
That's beautiful.
She's great.
I'm like, I love seeing some of the pictures of the sharing things that you have about the other kids, like your other children and Gemma too. So maybe you could share a little bit about how having Gemma in your family has affected them or like their relationship.
It's funny. My Lucy, she's 6. She's at an age where she's sort of indifferent. But they have always really loved on Gemma. They've always been really affectionate with her. Always telling her, "Oh, you're sweet, Gemma. You're a nice sister." I'll say that. I'm like, guys, you guys have such a nice sister. No, they're kind. They're not bothered by any of sort of the issues. They're not bothered when they see people who look different or behave different or sound different, because that's just normal. That's life at home, and that's life. And they're kind. They're kind to her, and my Lucy will read stories to her, which is really nice. The dynamic has sort of shifted. I always thought, Gemma would be the one reading stories to her younger siblings, and I thought, is that one of the losses I need to grieve? But no, it's my younger kids are loving on their older sister. My youngest is always saying, "Good morning, Jemmy," and asking to climb up onto her bed and give her kisses, and always rubbing her legs. And no, they're just really sweet with her. And Gemma loves the noise. She loves the chaos. She loves the attention. You can absolutely tell that she knows when her siblings are around. So Gemma has a vision impairment, quite a severe vision impairment. So she can't see, but she can hear really well. So she really loves music. She really loves certain people's voices. So when siblings come home from school, she's like looking towards the sound of the voices, because she knows her brother and her sister are home from school. Yeah, it's wild over here.
Yeah. No kidding.
I also this is like this story, I'm hearing it also for the first time. And I'm just wondering, like, so, doctors had all these things that they said and all this kind of stuff. But today, like, how does she communicate with you guys? Or how do you know her so well, So this is like beautiful example of her, like, looking in the direction of her siblings. They're coming home. And, I'm just wondering if you have a few stories about just kind of ways in which she shows you who she is, and all of these kinds of I'm sure there's millions of ways, but just
that's a great question though.
She doesn't communicate not well. She vocalizes a little bit, but she's nonverbal. And developmentally, we don't really know how old she is. There's a lot of speculation that she is still quite young, like a baby almost. But when their siblings are fighting, sometimes she starts to laugh. Or if one of them's getting in trouble, she's like busting a gut in her bed, or in like her orthopedic chair in the living room. We say a rosary in the evening as a family. At least we try to. It's a bit chaotic, and James and Lucy are running around, and nobody's sitting still. And one of us will, scold them, and Gemma just starts laughing. The first time Matt and I ever went away, we went to a family wedding in Ontario without the kids. So it was our first time away from the kids. We were gone for 4 days, and my sisters were here with Gemma. And as soon as we walked in, I heard this laughter. And and because I walked in the front door and I went, hello, we're home. And some of my other kids came running, and I heard somebody laughing, and my sister yelled from Gemma's room. She's like, Gemma's laughing. Like she had never had that reaction to us before. It was the first time I really realized how much she recognized us. Yeah. So she is much happier now than she used to be. She smiles a lot. She's very calm and content. We can tell when she's having a hard time. We can tell when her cry is pain, or when it's sort of irritation or discomfort. Like there's sort of different levels to it. We can usually tell. Sometimes we're just absolutely guessing, especially when it comes to illness. But you know, we guess until we figure it out.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so.
And she does.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Sorry. I don't even know if this is. So I'm a music therapist. I do research, and I've worked with a lot of kids with varying disabilities and stuff. But I got to be involved in this study with kids with cerebral palsy who were nonverbal, and they had. So I was a music therapist in the study, and so we were wearing EEG caps measuring our brainwaves. And so I was doing like singing, and then we alternated between singing and storytelling with the kids. But mom was there too, also in an EEG cap. And what they were looking for is how are the brainwaves synchronizing? And it was really beautiful, because what they found in the study is that the brainwaves of mom, who was just watching, were synchronizing with her child. And that in that moment she's in tune to the point where her brainwaves are totally synchronized with the child, with whatever was going on. And that was the main finding of that study. So it was just
that's
like
unreal.
Isn't that cool? So just as you're describing, really cool. Like being able to understand or tune in, it's like, that's like, it's a real thing. You can see that. I mean, of course, it's a real thing, but it shows up even in the brain, which is just, it's so beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe it. And actually, Gemma is in music therapy right now. We have a music therapist who comes to the house once a week, because Gemma's not in school right now, just with all the illnesses and the pandemic. Her health is not quite robust enough. She loves music, absolutely loves music. My parents are both musicians, and they used to sing at Mass on Sundays, and she especially liked my dad's voice. And so when my dad would start singing the psalm, we'd be at Mass, and sometimes Gemma would have been wailing all through Mass, and my dad would start to sing, and she would stop and like look up towards the speakers. And she still does it when we go over to my parents' house and she hears Grampy start talking to her. She just responds to him so differently. So yes, I have music playing for her all the time in her room. Music all the time. Playing music while I'm changing her, when I'm carrying her around. I got music playing in my pocket. We sing to her. She just loves it. Absolutely loves it.
So beautiful. It just speaks to like the personhood, like when even when there's like a limited ability to express in words or in like whatever, like there's still like she's a unique person with her own likes and dislikes in the same way that everybody else does, like a different way of communicating those things. But but just like God created that she loves her Grampy's voice.
Oh, she does, yeah.
And that she laughs when her mom and dad come home and she gets to hear their voice. Like,
or when her siblings are fighting.
Or when her siblings are
so good.
That must kind of diffuse situations sometimes. If it's like
sometimes, yes. Okay. Sometimes it makes James more mad and will stomp off too, because his older sister's picking on him.
Fair enough.
I was like, I feel like she kind of gets, she's like, you guys.
You just
so that's really great. That's so fun.
That's amazing. Oh, that's beautiful. Okay, so maybe we'll ask one last question and just say, if there's anything, like just to ask you if there's anything else that you want to share, anything else that's on your heart, or if there were maybe parents who are like, if there are parents who may be in the stage of your child is home from the hospital and they've been screaming at home for 4 months and they're kind of in that most difficult part right now, if there's anything that you think would be good for them to hear.
Oh man. Oh gosh.
I mean, no pressure.
So many
just
things. So many things. But really, sort of when you're first in the throes of it, is find parents who relate. It's so lonely and it's so isolating having a child with profound disabilities with serious medical issues. It's really isolating, sort of loving and having the kind of child who the world actively does not want, who the world actively does not love or value, even who many Catholics do not actively want or love or value. It's the loneliest I've ever felt, is this parenthood. I've said quite a few times over the last few years that the motherhood of medical fragility is a motherhood spent at the foot of the cross. Like, absolutely. So finding parents who are walking that same road, or who have walked it, who sort of have not succumbed to bitterness, like not to not talk with, anybody, but people who are sort of holding on to hope, cling to those parents. That was what helped me a lot, was finding other parents walking the same road, often whose kids had a similar diagnosis to Gemma, who were in the trenches, but like finding the joy. So yeah, find a community, find people who get it. And joy does come. It really, really does. And oh my gosh, it can take a long time. I mean, I'm 9.5 years in, and I think I only just stopped crying at Gemma's birthday maybe a year or two ago. Like, it still brings up a lot of hard memories, but I find sort of the further out I get from all the traumatic memories, the less sad I feel. But yeah, there's so much joy that comes, and just, it's really humbling to love somebody who can do absolutely nothing for you in return, ever. She can never comfort me. She can never give me anything. She'll never tell me she loves me. She'll never hug me back. She can't make eye contact with me. And to experience like the love that I have for her, it's humbling that I can even feel this, because we're so selfish. We always want something in return, and right now there's nothing in return, but it's like it's joyful. It's peaceful. Oh.
Yeah.
It just,
that's beautiful.
Like, there is so much joy. It's coming. Like, I promise it's coming.
That's beautiful. It's like, it's very imitative of God's love, like that's just what really strikes me, is that, I mean, what can we give God? Like my, like my little meager nothing is like a drop in the ocean it's less than a drop in the ocean compared to God's love. So it really is like, his love is, I mean, it's not one-sided, because we do have a choice about how we love and all of those things. And he knows that. But in terms of like the scope of it and the ability and the, it's like, like being able to pour out love like that to another person is just so like imitative of how the Lord loves. It's really beautiful. It's beautiful.
It is.
I'm so glad. Thank you so much, Mary. Like
really,
it was
thank
just
you.
Such a gift to have you.
Thank you for asking me to come on and chat.
Honestly, it's like for the longest time, like the ladies will confirm, it was like in the fall and last year. I was like, maybe we should ask Mary Webb if she would.
Yes, your name has been on our planning list for a while.
It has been. That's right. That's right.
Totally. Yeah. But it was very beautiful. So so to all of those who might be in a situation where you have a medically fragile child, or somebody who does, then you can know that there is joy. Joy comes. There's hope. There's joy. It does. Yeah. That's
joy
beautiful.
Comes in the morning.
That's right. Yeah.
It really does.
Oh, okay. So we're really glad that all of you were able to join us this week. Thank you so much. And we want to ask in a special way, if you know anybody who has a child with a disability, or parents with an adverse prenatal diagnosis, we want to ask you to pray about it, think about it, and maybe consider sharing this episode with them if you think it would be helpful for them. And then all of those who are those parents who may have a child with a disability, we are praying for you in a special way this week. So please know of our prayers for you in a special way. And we're looking forward to being with all of you again next week. God bless you. Thanks, Mary. God bless.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this episode of In the Thicket. If you like what you hear, give us a rating and hit that subscribe button. We have new episodes every Monday with more stories and honest conversations about life when the going gets rough and the hope and humor amidst it all. We'd love for you to join our community on Instagram and Facebook at In the Thicket Podcast. While you're there, let us know how we can pray for you. God bless and see you next week.